Hello out there. Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists, Professor Bola Akintarinwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, and Professor Anthony Kila, Director, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies, also in Lagos, Nigeria. Gentlemen, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, let's start with Nigeria and the United States on a matter that has diplomacy and security and people-to-people implications. Nigeria says it will cooperate with Washington on visa restrictions imposed by the United States on its citizens and those from 5 other countries. On Friday, President Trump imposed immigration restrictions on citizens of Nigeria, Myanmar, Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan, Sudan, and Tanzania. U.S. officials say the countries failed to meet U.S. security and information sharing standards, which necessitated the new restrictions. President Buhari has established a committee to be chaired by the Honorable Minister of Interior to study and address the updated United States requirements. Presidential spokesman Femi Adesina says Nigeria remains committed to maintaining productive relations with the United States and its international allies, especially on matters of global security. Well, what exactly are we dealing with here? This morning, the BBC reported that Nigeria has already accepted the visa restriction placed by the United States. And Nigeria is saying it will cooperate with the United States to deal with those sensitive safety requirements that the United States is asking for. U.S. officials have also provided explanation for the visa restriction involving Nigeria. They have pointed to the fact that Nigeria is predominantly 50% Muslim. They've pointed to the fact of the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. They've pointed to the insecurity in Nigeria. So is the Nigerian government admitting guilt in this regard and saying we will deal with this challenge? Some Nigerians have said, well, we might as well just stay in our country anyway, because it's not everybody that is affected. It's only people who want to go and live in the United States that may be affected. Some other Nigerians have said, well, look at the countries we've been classed with. Sudan, Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan, Myanmar, and that in itself is a comment on the status and assessment on the level of respect that the United States has for Nigeria. Some Nigerians have said, okay, why don't we resort to reciprocity, which is at the heart of diplomacy? And then we also say, well, okay, Americans, if you don't want us to come and live in America, you to stay in your country. Don't come and look for immigration visa or residency visa in Nigeria. Professor Akintarinwa, I'll start with you, since this is your territory.
You see, all the schools of thought have valid points. It all depends on what we want to place emphasis on. Those who argue that we can as well stay in Nigeria, they are not wrong. The issue is that if you do not know where you are going to, you must know where you are coming from. The issue is that at the end of the day, the United States has actually levied a very critical allegation against government. It is indirectly saying that our system of government is at best inefficient. We do not always respond to complaints. When, for instance, the government of the US drew the attention of the government of Nigeria to 2 critical issues. The first being that, look, the Americans will want to have the government of Nigeria identify, give, precise, articulate information about attending passengers people who are asking for visa to go to the US, and also saying that, look, there is the need to share information on possible suspects, because the Americans believe that, look, Nigeria is increasingly becoming another terra cognita for terrorism. Now, they want to be very sure that visa is not given to potential terrorists. What prevents the government of Nigeria from promptly responding, from collaborating, especially that we are trying to contain the excesses of the Boko Haram insurgents? So in this case, that school of thought is security for its people. Now, when you look at those who say that, look, we should reciprocate, well, I've always argued, if you want to reciprocate, you must have the means.
To reciprocate.
Right? So I don't know what means you have to retaliate. You don't have the means. The mere fact that you choose to go to the US means that you are dissatisfied with the situational reality in Nigeria.
Exactly.
That is not good. This is not just B1, B2 visa. It is not just visiting, tourism. When you talk about migration, you are talking about live there permanently, beginning with permanent residence, valid for 10 years, after which you will now seek the citizenship of the United States. Now, if you say you do not want Nigeria anymore, you want to go and live in America on a permanent basis, you are saying that Nigeria is no longer good enough for you. You are seeking a better terrain, greener pasture. So, in this case, that school of thought will equally be valid. Perhaps more interestingly, when you want to take a critical look at this situation, it is more than admission of guilt on the part of the government of Nigeria. The issue is simply that, look, our political governance has never been predicated on any quest for efficiency, effectiveness of purpose. If you do a letter you send to government, is it always acknowledged? Do they respond to it?
Well, during Obasanjo's time and Jonathan's time, we acknowledge letters.
It depends on who is writing to you. I do not know whether the common man can write a letter to the ministry, and then you are expecting. They don't bother.
Yeah, the acknowledgement will not respond. They acknowledge. The question if they respond. Acknowledgement is a stamp.
Anyway,
no.
Professor Killer now let's have your input into this matter.
Well,
the Buhari government has set up a committee.
Yes.
You know, and Nigerians have been saying this is laughable. Because they will set up a committee to understand something that is so obvious to everybody. Then after that, another committee will be set up to review what the first committee has done. And at in any case, what is the purpose of this committee?
Indirect corruption.
The government should just respond because the Americans are so straightforward.
Respectfully, before Professor Killer takes the issue, please, if the Nigerian people are saying laughable, we should pity them. It is more than laughable.
It's cryable.
You see, the issue is that what the government of Nigeria should be doing is to take sanctionary measures against for the inefficiency, all right?
Of the agencies.
Yes, because the issue now is that when the Americans drew the attention of Nigeria to the need, all right, for articulation of, the particulars, the identity, they have not done that. What's responsible for the delay? So we need to first of all sanction the people before you now come to the level of pleading with the government.
Professor Killer.
Yes, I think, four things I think I feel we need to point out very clearly. Number one, it's a paradox, you see, because the government says they're setting up a committee. In a way, it is good for them to be doing something about it. What they're saying is, maybe they shouldn't have said committee. We want to understand it better and then decide measures to be taken. Because when you say you want to set up a committee for a document, you want to say educational system is bad. They didn't do comprehension in school. Because the whole point is reading a text and understanding it and answering an exam paper in 45 minutes. So this idea of committee is actually, is laughable, it's ridiculous, you're right. The other thing is this. You see this issue of America banning Nigerians to come there or restricting their visa law. It is a spy on the hypocrisy of Nigerian elites or anybody that can afford passport and ticket to travel abroad. Because there's some people who keep supporting bad governance in Nigeria. either because they are paid to do so or because their gut feeling allows them to do so, then they go and live abroad, go and deliver their children abroad, and travel abroad every time. It is that hypocrisy of the ruling class who lives in Nigeria, and a lot of them are actually dying abroad as well, because the situation is bad in Nigeria.
And they get buried abroad.
As long as they get buried abroad. It just shows you how bad the country is. That is what it tells us. Because you don't have this kind of situation. And I must say this, sadly, starting from Mr. President, who is for medical treatment abroad. He has the right to, but it shows you that hospitals are not good in Nigeria. At least they don't trust it. The system is bad because you don't have foreign presidents outside Nigeria going abroad for treatment and other foreign elites going abroad for other things. I'm not blaming anybody. We just need to know that things are bad here. That is why people can threaten us with visa. You see, the other thing is this.
Imagine Americans coming for treatment in Nigeria.
In Nigeria. Well, it used to happen. No, I'll tell you what, we should be careful. In the 60s,
that's the reciprocity.
Actually, in the 60s and the 70s, people used to come to UI for treatment. This country was that good before. When people came up for abroad for treatment in Nigeria, this is where we are today. Now, the other point...
When I was a secondary school student, we had Pakistani and Indian and Ghanaian teachers.
Absolutely.
Those were the people who taught us in part.
Well, we should blame some of them because some of them...
And as an undergraduate, we had Americans, we had people from Oxford, from everywhere.
Students and
now
teachers.
Nobody wants to come to
Nigeria. So that is where we are. Now, the other thing is this, and I think, and here we go to the Foreign Affairs Office, and indeed, the government as a whole. We've lost a strategic governance point, which will have scored well. When situations like this happen, Professor Akinterewa is right. You talk about reciprocity of mendicants. What do you reciprocate? I said last time that Nigerian situation were that of mendicants in tuxedos. Because we have nothing and we're still bragging to have something. That is the truth. But we've lost a chance, even in our poverty, like the Gaspari has shown us, and even Mugabe has chance to show us that even when you are poor, if you can think well, there are things you could do. Nigeria's lost a strategic situation. Now, you see, Nigerian government has lost a situation here. When the American government did this, we could have played in a strategic way to put the American embassy in Nigeria on the defense. Instead of us saying we collaborate and saying things, we could have made statements that will force them out to come and explain themselves and be saying, look, we love Nigeria, we have no problem with you, we think you're a good country. And without the government sounding like an ill-prepared student, saying I'll set up a committee to study, they could have played something smarter and allowed the embassy to force itself.
Well, Professor, let us take a short commercial break. When we return, then I'll have Professor Ariole's input. We'll be right back. It's still Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterewa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, and Professor Anthony Kila, Director, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies, also here in Lagos, Nigeria. Before we went on break, Professor Ariole had said, I would like to have your input on this matter about the visa restriction now imposed on Nigeria and other countries by the United States. Do you think that the Nigerian response is sensible, or do you think we should just let it ride and focus on our country?
Exactly, we need to. Seriously, the point is that U.S. has been announcing, what has to come from one step to the other. I mean, you go to U.S. Embassy now, you see people counting cash in U.S. Embassy, which has not been done before. And that's only in Nigeria we do that. I mean, they have imposed more money based on what they expected you to pay from e-processes. And then Nigeria did not do anything about it, did not say anything about it. Yeah. And we are now at this level of...
that was an issue in August. The Americans complained. And then Nigeria decided to revise its position.
Yeah, but
the Americans insisted on
that it continues.
Did not reverse their
Of course, they are not going to reverse. They are telling you already that they have something
that they are superior.
Yeah, so
you can't do reciprocity.
I mean, there is no reciprocity business in this because we still have Nigerian refugees in U.S. up to today who claim they are refugees, whether we like it or not. whether in Canada, whether in whatever, Nigerians who are still refugees, running away from Nigerian country to go to those countries. We still have Nigerians dying every day, crossing the Mediterranean Sea into Europe. So there is no issue of reciprocity here. They know that the country is in trouble.
Yeah.
And then the leadership of the country is not responding effectively to tackle the trouble.
Yeah.
And so there will be always from one level to the other. Today they are banning just non-immigrant visa. Tomorrow it could be B1 and B2 restriction. It's a process. The moment you are not intervening to solve the problem they are raising on a given issue, they will lift the bar, and so on and so forth. We know that Nigerians, the poor people are the ones really having feeling the pains, because they are the ones to run away from, if I should put it in quote, irresponsible leadership. And somehow, the president of US should really be pitiable, should have pity on them. Seriously, that's how I see it.
Why should there be any pity on the
pity
US
on
president?
the poor people trying to find a way for a better life.
Okay.
Yeah, that the president should be sorry for Nigeria.
Yes, he should be sorry for the poor Nigerians that are trying to find ways to have a better life, you know. That's all we are trying to say.
Reports have indicated, reports have indicated that the US funded the election of President Muhammadu Buhari.
Of course, we know now.
Thank you for your insights.
So,
Professor Ariole, Professor Akinterewa, and Professor Kila. Let's take on another, very close to home subject. Right here in Lagos, where the Lagos state government has implemented the ban on Okada. That's the motorcycle and tricycles in 15 local councils, effective yesterday, February 1st. Benga Motosho, Commissioner for Information and Strategy, announced at a press conference in Lagos. He said the decision was made after a review of casualties. As Tivo Ride and Okada motorbike hailing services will be affected by the ban. Omotosho said all forms of commercial motorcycles will be affected. The ban cites a 2018 law to ban motorcycles and small three-wheeled vehicles known as keke marwa or tricycles or keke napep, used for commercial purposes. The regulation will bar them from 40 bridges and flyovers and areas covering the business districts of Victoria Island and Lagos Island and Papa, where the primary port is located, and Ikeja, which is home to the international airport, and other parts of the city of Lagos. Now, that took effect yesterday, but we've had a number of reports. The first report is that, a category of investors in the Okada or motorcycle business in Lagos, including, I think, GoMax, Ope, GoKada, that these were companies that had some kind of formal arrangement with the Lagos state government. And some of them, particularly Max, according to the CEO of the company, had invested as much as 5 billion naira, based on the assurance that there will be certainty and, also sanctity of contract. But that has not happened. That's one. Two, concerns have also been expressed about, the motorcyclists and the tricyclists that, look, if you are taking these people out of job, what are you providing as an alternative? The Lagos state government has not announced an alternative. Three, yesterday and on Friday also, the motorcyclists and the tricyclists staged a protest on the streets of Lagos. And they said, look, they have the right to earn a living. One of the protesters even said, well, she's a woman, she's involved in this line of business, and that the only option now left to her now is prostitution, and that the state government should not push her into prostitution because this is her source of livelihood. Four, some Nigerians are saying that, well, if you have banned these people, yes, you may have solved the problem of safety and security and crime, to which, the operations of the tricyclists and motorcyclists has been associated. But then, do you have some other means, some other ways of resolving this problem? But of course, elites, like Professor Akinterewa and Professor Kila and Professor Ariole, will say that, well, yesterday on the streets of Lagos and today on their way around the city, they were saved, the nuisance of Okada riders and
I'm not one of them.
I agree with you on that.
So but is it about elite comfort, or about providing jobs, or about ensuring a workable transportation system in Lagos?
I think that we need, especially the elite, before we bring others, to commend the sagacious courage of the Sanwo-Olu administration. The problem is not about creation of jobs. It's not about anybody wanting to engage in prostitution. If you want to engage in prostitution, it's not because you are riding an Okada or doing another business. The issue is the rule of law. The law is there. Please, what the Sanwo-Olu administration had done is just to put again emphasis on the need to have the 2012 Road Transportation Reform Act in place. The law has been there since 2012. If you take a look at the provisions which were renewed in 2018, they are so explicit. The issue, the position of the government is not that they do not want these people. It is not that there is no contractual understanding between the government of Lagos State and the GOMAX, the ORIDE, and all others. The issue is, how do the motorists, the motorcyclists, the tricyclists, how do they operate on the road? They don't have any discipline at all. Even when you have the red light saying stop, no, they still try to maneuver. And the moment, for instance, they create an accident, you see these most of the motorcyclists, the riders, illiterate, come in solidarity and coming to attack people who are law-abiding. Please, let me remind you, what does the law say? The law says that if you are going to make use of a motorcycle, the engine capacity must not be less than 200 cc. Then if you are carrying a passenger, the preventive helmet must be there. You must have been given a prior permission for exemption from the road, because the law does not allow the use of motorcycles on bridges, on streets, on roads that are dual way to and fro. It's very clear. And it says that, look, you cannot even carry any person in front. And if you are going to carry more than one person, there must be a specially fitted seat on your motorcycle. The laws are there, and the restriction had been there since 2012. Yeah. Now in 2018, because there was the report, and you rightly pointed it out, Dr. Abati, 10,000 people, they have a special word, you call it Okada word, in Igbobi. It is in light of the fact that, look, on daily basis, there are reports of accidents, broken legs. Yeah. If we have 200 million Nigerian people, and day after day, the number is being reduced from able people. We are now having people with broken hands, broken legs. What type of population is that?
Professor Akinjarawa, thank you for your Nigerian big man view of the problem, because that's how the ordinary Nigerian viewer who depends on motorcycles and tricycles.
Let them respect the rule of law, the traffic law.
Professor Killer, you live among the people. Maybe your view will be different.
No, it's not. But what I do, I think, empirically speaking, it is true that in 24 hours, there's been better traffic, there's been reduction of nuisance, which is a...
Oh, you also see it as nuisance?
No, yeah, it is a nuisance. I mean, which is easy.
Because of
Have you ever taken a ride on the back of Okada?
Oh, no, I'm too big. It's going to fall.
You are
I do, but
you are too big
I'm very
get
careful.
on the back.
No, because I do, but I'm very
It's
careful. Like you and I are with the common people.
But you see, but the point is this. I do agree that there needs to be an holistic approach. When you do road management, the three areas they should be covering. One is safety and security on the road. The other one is provision of transportation. And the third one is welfare, provision of job. So a good policy will actually capture those three things when you do it. And the way forward to do it is to preview what are the consequences of things going to be. Because don't forget that whilst we say the road has been rid of that nuisance, it is also true that some people do not have means to transport them anymore. Now, some people are stranded because they're used to having the tricycle and the bicycle, the Okada and the Mara people are not there for them. So a good policy needs to bear that in mind. But that said, we need to get used to what Professor Akintere is saying, to obey the rule of law. When we have a law, we must obey it. But there's a problem here, which is the problem of these people who have invested their money.
Exactly.
I think the government needs to look at that, because you can't build an investment on a project on a situation that some government just takes off overnight.
Professor Killer, we need to take a short break now.
Yes.
When we return, the conversation will continue. Professor Arole, just be on standby. We'll be back to you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintere, Director General, Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, and Professor Anthony Kila, Director, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies, also here in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, before we went on break, we were discussing the Lagos state government's decision to ban motorcycles and tricycles from about 40 bridges in Lagos and 15 local councils in the state. Professor Ariole, you seem to be the only panelist here, in addition to me, who has a very good experience.
Yes,
on the
I
back
ride
of Okada and the tricyclists. Professor Kila and Professor Akintere, these are the elites.
I ride them really, but the reason is that, you see, the way the Lagos road is constructed, it's not easy to get to where you want to go at any given time, unless you have that kind of rush. But my worry, as Professor Akintere mentioned, or Professor Kila mentioned rather, about this systemic risk that is about to set in. People invested. And you know why that investment is being planned, and you allow them to carry out the investment. Either 5 years projection has been set or 10 years projection has been set. And they have also encouraged, employment of the youth, for sure. Now you set in a systemic risk, which will now, be very, very disastrous for everybody, including safety of life and whatever. I have been to Cotonou. They regulate their own, and they are cooperative. Why can't we do it here? Before you go
in Cotonou, the motorcyclists, do they respect?
That's what I'm saying. They respect it.
Hang on a second,
They respect it, and they get license.
Precisely.
B license. You can't be on the road without any license. So those people we have, some of them don't know even what they are doing.
Yeah, that's the point.
At least allow them to be in a school where they can get B license before they come riding the bike. Very important. Yeah. Because some of them feel the road is just for them. Anything can happen.
But I also think, and on principle, there's something that should be said. Whilst getting rid of them as readers of a nuisance, I think eliminating totally a figure in the civic space is a failure of governance and teachers and pedagogy. We should be able to train and regulate.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Professor.
Even in Chad.
The law is clear on this.
Yes.
The law is very clear. The law has not said that the investors cannot put their motorcycles on the road. It only insists that the motorcycle
that they can use.
The motorcycle must at least have an engine capacity not less than 200 cc.
No, beyond that, I also expect the person riding
and
it
then
to
they
be
must
knowledgeable.
they must obtain a permission for exemption from the routes.
Gentlemen, professors, I'm sure we'll return to this subject again, because all of us will see, the consequences, the implications, the impact. And since we all live in Lagos, we'll have the opportunity again to, advise the Lagos state government appropriately to do an assessment of the policy that is now being enforced. Let's go to the United Kingdom, where something momentous and historic happened on January 31. the United Kingdom has officially left the European Union after 47 years of membership, and more than 3 years after it voted to do so in a referendum. The historic moment, which happened at 11 p.m. GMT on Friday, January 31st, was marked by both celebrations and anti-Brexit protests. Candlelit vigils were held in Scotland, which voted to stay in the European Union, while Brexiteers partied in London's Parliament Square. The crowd erupted when Brexit champion Nigel Farage appeared on stage, joining in with singing Britain's national anthem. As the clock struck, Professor Killer, you used to live in the United Kingdom, and I think you have dual nationality. So were you part of the 52% that voted to leave, or part of the Scottish 68%? Where there's a lot of anger that voted to remain. Now, what are the implications of this transition period in which the United Kingdom now finds itself?
Amazingly, I must say something. You say they sang the national anthem. Interestingly, I don't know the last time the national anthem was sung in a public space in England. It is not a British thing to go about waving flags.
They see this as independence.
Yes,
as freedom.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a milestone. I spoke to some people yesterday, and somebody, in a very British way, told me, well, the water still stays the same.
Oh, yeah?
Let's see what happens. Let's see how it goes. It's a big moment. Interestingly, though, because of the intrinsic connection and connectivity between EU and Britain, I don't think it's going to be a major thing. We're going to see as we go ahead, because this thing, as for now, is full of ethos. It must be said that Britain is charting a new course for itself. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had the African Investment Forum. I think Britain is going to rediscover Commonwealth and see the rest of the world where it goes on. And I think the EU are going to remind Britain you left, so you can't have life easy as well. But I think there's a lot of relationship that will not allow it to be as it should be. So we're just going to see, as it goes along. There's a consequence people are not talking about, which is the internal consequence of the United Kingdom.
Exactly.
Because you have Scotland,
and not
who politically and demographically are not Brexit people, who really want to stay. You have a part of the island.
We're talking about the second independence
exactly.
Which Boris Johnson has rejected. Which the EU, well, it's also not so enthusiastic about.
But it's a fighting ground. That's another rallying point for Scotland at the moment. And the narrative they're going to push forward is going to be the same way you want a Brexit, we want exit of the United Kingdom as well. Why? Because our visions are not the same, and we're not the same people. And you want to govern yourself, let us govern ourselves. But that is something that they need to look into as well.
Well, Professor Ariole, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says this is not the end of an era. It's a new beginning.
Yeah.
How much of a new beginning is it?
Well, I don't really see so much new beginning, because since I've known Britain, I crossed there from the Channel to France.
Across the Channel?
Yes, I go through there.
It's not closed.
What happened? It's not closed. We still stay somewhere around Waterloo, or what do you call it, St. Paul International, this thing, to get a ticket to cross to France. I mean, the border remains still on surveillance process.
Mode, yes.
I mean, so I don't see anything very... What I try to think about that exit is that there's going to be more problem in Britain, for sure, as mentioned.
Short term, perhaps.
Yeah, short term, agree, because trade deal will still be there. They still have a long way to re-establish the trade deal they have already agreed with Euro and European Union and whatever. And everybody knows that for now, the service input of the GDP of Britain is low. And if it's low, it proves that Britain is not really making any good advance, and they depend on service industry
but that is Boris Johnson's point. So he says a new dawn is here. He says this is a new beginning.
But we know it's victimization process.
No, but he's
already telling France that their wine will not be sold in
yes, and he's saying Boris is saying that I'm going to prove people like Victor Ariole wrong, who think there is nothing happening.
Now we know that it's going to be difficult. It can only be a mayor of London.
I think it's a new beginning.
He's a mayor of London.
Professor Akinta.
Sorry, sir. I want to tell you, Macron is to give the Lord Mayor of London, what do you call it, prize, French prize.
Yes.
which means between Mayor of London and the Lord Mayor of London,
yes.
Crisis already exists on who really want to be with EU and who won't be with EU.
Well, in any case, what we're told is that the United Kingdom will remain a friend of Europe.
Absolutely,
But
yes.
on its own terms,
Yes.
on free and independent
I
terms.
say again, you cannot
How
be
they
more
work that
correct.
out. Yes, but Prof,
You cannot be more correct.
let me pose a specific question to you. Today, in this day, page 12, you have a piece titled The Dynamics of Nigerian-British Relations in the Post-Brexit Era, the challenge of new Anglo-French rivalry.
Yes.
Where does the Anglo-French rivalry, where does it come in this matter?
You see, when the Second World War came to an end, and there was need to have an anti-German strategy, there were two levels of strategic planning.
Yeah.
In 1963, agreement was reached to have a Franco-British, summit, meant to review areas of possible misunderstanding. There is also Franco-German summit. They were always meeting regularly. So the issue now, the rivalry in this particular case is that the Francophone members in African Union, and particularly the ECOWAS, they appear now to be coming together to taking a common position that is inimical to the position of the ECOWAS. So in this case, look at the ECO, the name reserved by ECOWAS for their single currency. The CFA has now been renamed ECO, and the Anglophones are complaining about that one. That is a pointer. The Francophones are on record to be the only ones sponsoring the admission of Morocco's admission into the ECOWAS. Morocco is in northern region, northern Africa. So they are now coming together.
It's a language block.
So you now have the French, France under Macron, Emmanuel Macron, giving this active support. And I am saying that the British now exiting from European Union is most likely to solidarize itself with Nigeria and the Anglophones in such a way now that it will now be a conflict between contiguity of the Francophone neighbors and propinquity between Nigeria and France. And France.
But
so this is where
it's happening in Borno State
already.
The question that also needs to be addressed is how African countries prepared for a post-Brexit reality, so that we will not have a situation whereby it is the United Kingdom dictating to the African countries. Yes, the South African Customs Union, the UK has been engaging the South African Customs Union plus Mozambique. But what have they been doing in other parts of the Commonwealth?
This time you cannot be more concerned. You cannot be more correct, because that is the challenge. African people are never prepared for anything. We are always reacting. I think it is only when there's problem that we react.
I think it's a good time.
We'll take a short break now. And then when we return, Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, will continue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintenrewa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies, University of Lagos, Nigeria, and Professor Anthony Kila, Director, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies, also here in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, let's go to the United States, where Republicans are preparing to defend their expected acquittal of President Donald Trump on TV, talk shows, and elsewhere. The Republicans-controlled Senate voted to reject witness testimony at the president's impeachment trial, sparking criticism that they were aiding a cover-up and abdicating their duties. Criticism intensified after media reports that officials cited presidential privilege in redacting 24 emails related to Mr. Trump's hold on military assistance to Ukraine, an issue at the heart of his impeachment trial for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Mr. Trump claimed his polling numbers were up after the Senate paved the way for his acquittal next Wednesday. Then the Senate voted largely along party lines to move forward with President Trump's impeachment trial without calling for additional witnesses or collecting new evidence, clearing the way of Donald Trump's almost certain acquittal next week. As it is, it seems very obvious that President Trump will be acquitted after, Andrew Johnson and after President Bill Clinton. And in his own particular case, we've seen an indication that numbers matter in politics. To deny the calling of witnesses and additional evidence, the Senate voted along partisan lines, 51-49. And, apart from Senator Susan Collins, who voted, and also another senator, Mitt Romney, who voted in support of the Democrats. At the end of the day, we didn't get the required number. Senator Lama Alexander refused to vote for the Democrats, and Senator Murkowski also refused to vote because the Democrats needed a record number of 4. Yeah. So as it is, this is the situation President Trump will go through. Maybe it will help his fortunes. But I think, the presiding officer, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, John Roberts, must be specially commended so far because he took a decision that he would not break any tie. Yeah. And it will be untidy for a member of the judiciary to get directly involved in any form or the other in a legislative process. He was reminded of the impeachment trial of Andrew Johnson, President Johnson. And he said, well, that the presiding officer in that case broke the ties twice. Does not mean that another presiding Chief Justice should do the same. And I think he should be commended for his courage, for his determination, and for the manner in which he has stayed faithful. Yes. But Professor Killer, you also have American connections. Yeah, in fact, what's your take?
In fact, I think, it's sort of self-reference. About 20 years ago, people can Google it and say that, I wrote a piece called A Place for Justice Roberts in History.
Oh, really?
He's been consistent on things like this, to always be above board about that. I wrote that paper almost 20 years ago, and he's been that way. One thing must be said, that it's a shame, whether it's in case of Clinton or in the case of Trump today, that on matters of high national issues like this, senators become politicians rather than become senators of the Republic, and they vote along partisan line. It is a shame because the fathers of the Constitution created the American Constitution in a way that in the times of need, individuals will rise above sectarian divisions and go in defense of the Constitution. It must also be said that much as the Democrats have done to make their case, they've not been able to convince and coordinate Republicans to go for them. And this whole vote is all about that. It's not about the content or merit, if Trump is guilty or not. It's just the ability, as you said, numbers is might. It's the ability to rally up numbers, and that is what we are viewing. We shall see later. Trump is winning in Parliament. We shall see if he wins in the Parliament of the public opinion. That is where the next battle is to be seen.
Correct, most correct, very correct. Well, let's go to Guinea Conakry. The Guinea Conakry community in Nigeria has solicited President Muhammadu Buhari and other African leaders' support to discourage President Alpha Conde from his third-term bid. Conde, who was the first democratically elected president of the country, has been in office since 2010. But the city of Conakry has been up in turmoil since he announced his desire to seek referendum to extend his stay in office. Leader of the Guinea Conakry community in Nigeria, Mohamed Ba, lamented that Guineans were being killed daily by security agents allegedly recruited by President Conde to shoot anybody that protests against him. He urged the international community to avoid a fire brigade approach and come to the aid of the Guinean Conakry people as soon as possible by stopping President Conde from the referendum to prolong his stay in office. Professor Ariole, this sounds very familiar.
Yes, very familiar, because this is where the Fulanis have the majority. That is in Guinea. I mean, 45%.
Is this about Fulani people or
whatever,
constitutional
Fulani,
integrity?
Whether constitutional integrity, what I'm saying is that Selun Diallo has been fighting to get this Alpha Conde out of power. And it has been that since 1958 they had independence. The Fulani people have been persecuted. That's what I'm saying. Persecution has been on the Fulani since 1958. You know, and this is the time for them to rise up and say, look, enough is enough for the minorities who have been grouping themselves together to fight the Fulanis in Guinea. And for 45% of population, that is, and they have also support in Nigeria. This, I will support them to go and tell Alpha Conde that enough is enough. For third time, unfortunately, he came here in Kanu and celebrated with the Kanu people for up to 3-4 days. I wouldn't know on what ground he came here, either to solicit their support so that he will go for third term, and nobody mentioned about his being very inimical to the Fulani people in Guinea. And so it's very important that Nigeria go in full force to make sure that Alpha Conde does not get third term at all. It's very, very important.
Professor Akindele,
very, very important.
Ethnic politics, and should Nigeria go on an expedition, or the Father Christmas expedition in Guinea Conakry?
Okay.
Ethnic politics, cum constitutional politics. The problem is not as simple as we are discussing it. Constitutionally, first of all, in Guinea, the political system is neither a presidential system nor a parliamentary system. At best, something near it we say is semi-presidential.
Yeah.
But being semi-presidential is still different from what obtains
in France,
yeah, from which they have borrowed their system. Initially, where election period for the president is 7 years. Yes. You see, the critical point on which to place emphasis is that the president of Guinea Conakry has the capacity, the right, the constitutional backing to dissolve the National Assembly.
Yeah, the parliament.
To dissolve the parliament.
And that's because he stands for unity.
Now, the issue now is that if the Guinean community in Nigeria is now seeking help, it is in light of the fact that if you vote against him, you try to create problems for him, all he needs to do is to dissolve. Yeah. All right? The parliament. The second point to note is that, look, in Africa, we have Rwanda, we have Burundi. The presidents of these two countries are already targeting, planning for a third term.
Yeah. In Africa, we have the TTS, the third term agenda syndrome.
Yeah, but West Africa,
it's a kind of sickness that exposes people to craziness and silliness.
In addition to that,
it creeps in towards the second part of their second term.
We have many.
Is that an Africa disease?
Yes, and it is manifested by people pretending not to want it, but actively going for it.
Yes, that's another problem.
The first move is now to ban the constitution. I think it's a disease that we already studied.
Look, you see, in Africa,
and it must be stopped.
We have some countries like Uganda, Congo-Brazzaville, and you have Togo, where there's no...
We need to go now. I know we can spend a whole day with 3 professors. You can have a whole day symposium on this subject or any other subject we've considered today. But we've got to go. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. See you next Sunday.